So you want to know the ins and outs of managing your money. Well, lucky for you, you're just in time for another episode of Master Your Finances with certified financial planner professional Kurtis Baker. Kurt and his panel of experts are here for you and will cover topics from a legal and personal standpoint. They'll discuss tax efficiency, liability, owning, managing, and saving your money, and more. Master Your Finances is underwritten in part by Certified Wealth Management and Investment and Rider University. Rider offers continuing studies programs for adults who need flexibility. Want to add new skills to your resume? Take a continuing studies course at Rider University. Now, let's learn how we can better change our habits with Kurtis Baker.
Do you want to learn how you can assist veterans? Do you want a list of organizations that aid veterans? Jeremy Deck is a retired U.S. Army veteran who has used his leadership, communication, and team building abilities in a variety of settings. With his military experience as the Food Service Director for the United States Military Academy, he will share his knowledge of the resources available to veterans as well as volunteer opportunities to assist veterans. He will fill you with joy and pride as you give back to and assist veterans. Man, this is, Jeremy, just awesome what you're doing. I know you're a very successful guy and all, but I mean, all that you're doing for the veterans. And I think over the decades, I was born in the 60s. Veterans have been not necessarily always upheld the way they probably should be because they're put in really rough situations. And I know we lose, I think it's something like 11 or so a day, I believe it is right now, because of the PTSD and all the issues that they have to deal with coming back from these experiences that, let's just say, most of us would not want to endure, and it's a rough time. But the fact that we, I think as a society, have really come around where I think most of us are like, hey, we need to help these people. They go out there and they basically protect the country. They keep us here, and they allow us to enjoy. They provide that umbrella that allows us to enjoy all those privileges and things that we enjoy every single day. And a lot of times we tend to forget it sometimes, right? So anyway, first of all, I just want to thank you for your service and everything you've been doing, man. So that's awesome.
Thank you, Kurt. I appreciate it.
So tell us a little bit about how you got involved in this and how you got started and so forth.
It's one heck of a story.
There you go. We only have about 45 or so minutes to talk, so don't.
Only 45? Those that know me might say 45 isn't long enough.
Yeah.
So I guess where to start. So I'm actually I grew up somewhat locally. I actually grew up over in Berks County, Pennsylvania. I grew up in the area. James Carville kind of said at one point, Pennsylvania is it's two different makeups. It's Pittsburgh and Philadelphia with Alabama in between, I think was
pretty
the
much.
line.
Yeah, it's pretty much
So
true.
I grew up in the Alabama portion of the part of Pennsylvania between Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. But very early on, as I was getting ready to leave high school, I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do for a living, to be completely upfront. And I felt the military, oddly enough, I had some military recruiters show up at lunch one day. This is my senior year of high school, and I figured it was good enough for my father. I figured, what the heck? I didn't know what I wanted to do, didn't want to pay off for the college students listening out there. I didn't know that I wanted to be paying off student loans for the rest of my life.
Right.
And very early I said, you know what, I think the military is a good fit. There's college money there, there's some opportunity, and you know what, I can learn a skill at the same time. So left for basic training a month after graduating from high school, and a couple of years in, I realized, you know what, this is actually, I'm digging this. I could actually do this. And very quickly,
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, very quickly, a 4-year enlistment turned into 10 years.
Right.
I dare I say, I was actually having a little fun.
Right.
I was a paratrooper in the 82nd Airborne Division. I had been to South Korea by that point. I had been on a bunch of little deployments here and there, mainly to Central America and the Caribbean, which was really rough. I gotta say. That was. Woo.
That's why you like the military so much, right?
early on, the deployments were really good.
They didn't send you in Antarctica right away, apparently, right?
No.
That's good.
But yeah, the first 10 years kind of flew by.
Good.
And right about the 10-year mark, it's like, well, heck, I'm halfway through. I might as well keep going because at 20 years, I get a pension.
Right. True.
And at the time, I was 27, 28.
Right.
And you're that age, and you're like, man, I'm 10 years away from getting a pretty consistent pension for the rest of my life. Why not?
Right.
So not long after that, I said, if I'm going to continue doing this, I might as well figure out a way to make an impact. So I made the decision to become a warrant officer. Still in the so I was a cook my first 12 years in the military, and I had the option to become a warrant officer, which is a technical expert in a specific field. In this case, I was a technical expert in food service. And what that really meant was I was expected to be a subject matter expert on everything food service related, from procurement to consumption.
And that's even though it's a rough thing in just like the regular world. Here you got to like move it too. I mean, you got to know. People want to get fed when they're fighting, I'm assuming.
And
it's
move
kind of
it,
important.
Move it in some of the most interesting
Tough
and
ways.
austere terrain. I mean, let's use Afghanistan for example. I actually spent my second deployment in Afghanistan in 2012. I actually supervised the distribution of to 90 different locations throughout Afghanistan. And most of them were ranged in size from about 10 or 15 all the way up to a couple of hundred. I was part of the United States Army Special Operations Command. We were part of a joint headquarters in Afghanistan. And I have to say that was one of the most eye-opening experiences and most educational experiences in my Army career, just having to figure out a way to deliver food to that many people. So it was our task force was about 5,000 people.
Right.
And delivering food to that many people across and essentially all of Afghanistan, and I can't remember correctly, but I think Afghanistan is essentially the size of Texas.
It's pretty big.
It's a pretty big country.
And it's pretty rugged from what I understand. I've never been there personally, but I've just read and seen movies and all that kind of stuff. So what are some things, I just knew it was challenging, but so what are some things you learned from that experience of like, okay, I'm going to go, there's no they don't order takeout, right? You got it's no, Uber Eats or anything like that available. So what are some things you learned from a logistics standpoint? Like, how do you get this done? Because you have to do it. You have to get it there. You have to get it there on time. You have to get the right amount. I mean, there's a lot more to this than what I'm thinking. You can't just stop in Costco if you're in the war zone, right?
Very true. I would say the biggest thing I learned from that experience was relationships.
Okay.
As crazy as that sounds, in a country like Afghanistan, where all of the people that you support are wearing the same uniform as you,
right?
The biggest thing I learned was the relationships, because yes, I'm a subject matter expert, but getting someone on the other side of the country to understand that I'm a subject matter expert and I'm here to help is not necessarily always easy.
No.
And it's kind of funny because I've taken a lot of what I learned, especially in the last half of my military career, and transferred it to what I do now and what I've done over the last 3 years or so.
And you bring up a lot of points. For one, you're in. There's a lot of duress out there.
Oh yeah.
And you can't say, well, if you get this food product to my men out there in the field or women, I'm going to give you a bonus at the end of the year. I'm going to compensate you or whatever. I mean, you've got a challenge, so to speak, because one, it's a tough situation, and two, the tools in your toolbox are pretty limited on how to motivate that person. Yep. So you want to give us some ideas of, well, how do you motivate me? I'm on the other side of the mountain, and you want me to do something for you that I'm like, I'm not so sure, Jeremy. Maybe I don't know what you're talking about, man.
It's about buy-in. It's okay. Understanding and getting them to commit to understanding that they have a problem or an issue, so to speak, and then on top of that, getting them to understand that the issue that you're trying to fix, that the solution you're trying to give them fixes their issue.
There you go.
To a degree that helps them in a way that's maximizing their available time to do what it is they need to do, especially in the military, where you're going out and you're essentially fighting for your country in a foreign country.
Right.
How I'm going to eat shouldn't be a concern if that's your basic fundamental day-to-day responsibility.
Right. Well, that's just awesome. So, all right. So you've had some challenging experiences, and so now you're a subject matter expert. You're a warrant officer. So what did you do now with that expertise? You went to Afghanistan, right? So,
yep.
And you learned some things about. I think life comes down to relationships. Just like. It's amazing how this always comes back down to relationships, right? I mean, we can live in an electronic world, or we can live in this world that we think is data-driven, but it's really comes back down to who are the people on each side of all this stuff, and how do we get along, and how do we interact as individuals. And I believe that's something that all of us should learn, especially younger generations where we tend to be disconnected because electronics tends to be the way that we like to connect, right? People texting in front of each other and they're not actually looking at each other, that kind of thing.
100%.
But it all comes down to really building basic, solid, one-on-one, look me in the eye, tell me how you feel and why I should be doing what I'm doing, and help me care about what's going on here. And we're going to help each other out, and everybody's going to grow through that process, right?
Exactly.
And no other place is more important than when you're in the military, in a war zone, and you're trying to help people do what they need to do, which is a difficult job, and people die. So people get injured if we don't do this correctly the best way we can. So you handle that with, I think you said like 90 different locations in Afghanistan. I can't even, that's a lot of places, man. Oh. So, and you got the food there, right?
Thankfully. In a lot of different ways.
There was a lot, yeah. So any little quick stories you want to tell us about some challenges you had while you were doing that?
Yeah, so one of the biggest ways we distributed food in country was under a parachute. And share the quick story that you asked for is, I learned very quickly that we were killing ourselves from an equipment and standpoint. We were constantly throwing food out of airplanes when we had other resources available to us. So I think when I got there, I think over 50% of every parachute that went out of a plane into my organization had food or water in it.
Okay.
And I very quickly understood that was very resource intensive.
Right.
Yeah, so one of the things I did was try extremely hard to bring in other stakeholders to maximize and utilize other avenues to deliver that. And I said 5 in every 10 parachutes had food or water in it. When I left Afghanistan 6 months later, I had dropped that to 4 in 10. So
wow.
When I first got there, 50% of all parachutes had food in it. When I left, 40%. So I managed to essentially create more space under parachutes for bullets and fuel and things like that that didn't need to be taken up by water or food.
That's just awesome, man. So efficiency is in your blood,
That's
it sounds like.
Exactly what the focus was efficiency.
That's just awesome, man. We're going to take a quick break here. You're listening to Master Your Finances. We will be right back.
This is Master Your Finances with Kurt Baker, Certified Financial Planner Professional. Learn about tax efficiency, liability, owning, managing, and saving your money, and more from Kurt and his experienced panel of guests. Master Your Finances is underwritten in part by Certified Wealth Management and Investment and Rider University. Rider University offers flexible education for adult learners. For more information, it's rider.edu/nextstep.
Welcome back. You're listening to Master Your Finances. I am here with Jeremy Deck, and we're talking about veterans and how important they are to everything we do here, because without our veterans helping us out, we wouldn't be here. Who knows what language we're speaking right now?
This is true.
Who the heck knows, right? Very thankful to the veterans, Jeremy, and I appreciate everything you've done. So when we left off, I didn't know this about you were doing the logistic thing in Afghanistan, which had to be an extremely amazing experience just from an education standpoint. It's problem solving, creating more efficient means to do things, get the food there, using fewer parachutes, which is interesting. So then you could deliver more, other ammo and type things that are actually necessary in the front lines, which might be more appropriate to do a parachute drop type thing as opposed to maybe taking it by other means. So after that, what did you do after Afghanistan? I know you've got more things in your story here. So what happened after Afghanistan in your career there?
Yeah, so I left Afghanistan and fast forward about a year or two, and I decided I wanted to revisit something I decided not to go into when I left high school. I decided to go to college. Mm-hmm. And the military offers some really awesome benefits to go to college while you're serving. And I decided to take advantage of a program that essentially allowed me to unplug from the Army for a year and a half and actually become a full-time college student. It was essentially a way to broaden myself, right. A way to give back to the military, because there was obviously commitment on the back end. And I became a full-time college student for about a year and a half. I can certainly relate to some of the listeners out there. I went from not having a degree to having a degree in a year and a half. So I condensed Now I did roll in about 20 or so credit hours, but
so what were you studying when you went to? What was your area of interest?
So I'm a business major.
Okay.
I have a degree in business administration from a very small school in Eastern North Carolina, an amazing school, I have to say, called the University of North Carolina at Pembroke. And one of the things that I picked up on top of the extremely busy class schedule, I think I actually took 20 credit hours 3 semesters in a row, and then also took summer classes. I learned a lot in terms of being able to give back and I'll use data as a good example about that, or of my experience. As a business major, I really got into statistics, and as corny as it sounds and as frankly nerdy as it comes across, I actually learned a lot about Excel and spreadsheets and using data to drive decision making. And that's one of the big takeaways I had from pursuing higher education. And frankly, one of the reasons why I'm glad I waited so long to go to college was because I had those life experiences. Right. And I understand there's a certain degree of growth that happens in college. And frankly, I'm with a class load of 20 semester hours for 3 consecutive full-time semesters. That's not something I could have done as an 18-year-old fresh out of high school. I needed the opportunity to focus. And frankly, I was under the gun. The Army only gave me a year and a half to do the schooling that I needed. But I got it done. And I was also an honor student, so I actually took part in the university honors program also. And consequently enough, I actually did an honors thesis in legalization of marijuana.
Wow.
So at the time,
now it's happening.
Yeah.
Back then, it wasn't happening.
Yep. So I actually finished my undergrad in December of 2015. Right as legalization was starting to kind of happen across the country.
So did you predict that would happen?
Well, at that point, there was already some momentum, and Colorado had begun to prove that there was, if anything else, a lot of tax revenue to be gained from legalization efforts.
That gets governments interested.
It sure does.
Okay. All right. So you got done with your degree in a year and a half, which is pretty amazing, frankly. And so then where did your career go from there? It's from the military. I
actually moved to South Carolina and actually spent the next year or so at a little place called Fort Jackson. It's one of the bigger basic training bases in the U.S. Army. 6,000 to 10,000 students at any one time, depending on what time of the year. Had some regional oversight for a couple of different bases and the food service operation at each. And then I also decided, while I was going back to be a full-time soldier, I also decided to move forward with my education pursuits. And also became a graduate student at the University of South Carolina. Go Gamecocks.
Oh, okay.
So in addition to being a soldier, I was also still a full-time college student, doing a lot of night classes and a lot of weekend classes.
Okay. Was this involve business as well?
All business.
Okay.
Yep. So I finished my MBA finally in 2019.
Okay. All right. So this is where things get interesting, I think, right?
Yep.
I mean,
that's
where
things start to get a little fun. I mean, we've had
a little bit of this conversation already. So 2019, and he's like, all right, things are cooking now, man. All right.
No pun intended, but the cooking coming.
They're definitely cooking. So what was your shift then, which I think was pretty cool?
Yeah, so it's weird. So I was in my office, and I got to backtrack. So I actually managed to finish my degree in 2019 when I was already working at West Point.
Right.
So I think it was September of 2017, my boss calls me on the phone, and he says, "Hey, I have a problem at West Point. I need you to go fix it."
Right.
And that was all he told me. And I got on a plane about 2 weeks later, I think, not completely understanding what I was getting into, and I ended up taking over the food service operation at West Point for the next 3 years until I retired back in 2020.
Yeah, cadets like to eat. I don't know.
They
if you know
do,
that.
and in fact, if you get a chance to YouTube the U.S. Military Academy at West Point Cadet Mess Hall, you would be amazed at some of the time-lapse videos and the way the academy feeds cadets.
Okay.
my first 3 weeks of being there and learning the operation, I felt like I was drinking from a fire hose.
Right.
I had been in military food service at that point 21 years, and I'd never seen anything like what I had at West Point.
So what were your first things that you thought were a little different about what you've been used to?
So West Point's big claim to fame and what they do and the way so if you don't know, they actually feed the entire student body at lunch in one sitting in 20 minutes.
I did not know that.
That's what you got to check out the YouTube video.
Our school didn't do it. I mean, I went to
impressive.
an academy too, and our school did not do that.
Well, you guys were a little smaller, if I
we're
recall.
about a fourth the size. Yeah. Our whole school is one of your graduating classes.
Yep, that's true. So one of the biggest things that I learned was serving family style food. So it's essentially like going to a banquet.
Okay.
5 days a week. Throughout the course of the calendar year.
Right.
Or the academic year, I guess I should say.
Okay.
And that was learning how we did that and then trying to figure out ways to be as efficient as possible while doing that was the biggest challenge. And there was a lot of other issues going on. We talk about toxic work environments. The leadership at the time was a little bit of an issue. The biggest thing I needed to do was restore trust in what we were doing as an organization, and then to get buy-in from the cadets that what we were doing was going to be the way to fix it and to improve their dining experience, if you will.
Yeah, I'm sure you shouldn't be like an attorney because you seem to be a great arbitrator here. So I noticed the leadership issue. There's two things. I mean, I'm seeing this. I mean, I remember we changed our food services at least twice while I was there. And it was like it started off great, and then it got worse because ours was contracted out, right? So I think ours is a little different situation than yours. But if you have a leadership that's like not doing a great job, and now the cadets are like, oh, what the heck's going on here, right? So how did you start off like building back that trust? I mean, once you break down an organization like that, it's a lot harder to put that back in place, I think. So what are some of the things? What are some of the steps you took to help bring that back? Well,
so you almost have to be a chief marketing officer, a chief executive officer, a CFO. You have to be all of those things. And one of the things that I immediately started to understand when I got there was, as weird as this sounds, people were getting hurt almost on purpose
That's not good.
Just to get out of work.
Okay.
And one of the things that I started to understand was changing the culture in the organization was the first thing I needed to do. Getting people to understand that the leadership was listening to you, getting to understand and essentially become approachable, that if I have an issue and I'm an employee of the food service organization, that I'm going to come to my leadership and expect that they're actually going to do something about it and not just blow me off. And that was the biggest change, was being approachable, being somebody that could listen and that could enact change.
Yeah, no, that is really key. So you literally just said, "Hey, look, come tell me what's going on here." I mean, I'm paraphrasing, I'm sure. And the difference I think would happen is people are like, I'm going to tell him, but he's not going to do anything, right? I mean, this has been going on for blah 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 so long, and they're going to be like almost like, I don't believe you. But then you have to show. So what are some of the things you did initially that said, hey, I think this guy is for real and he's actually going to help us out? What were some of the gripes you heard? I mean, without getting any more specific than you can. But I mean, and then how did you respond to some of the concerns that were obviously telling people, hey, I'd rather injure myself than go to work today? I mean, that's pretty bad.
Yeah, one of the first things we did was actually recognition. I think the first month I was there, we actually decided to get the entire staff together and just give them a certificate that said, hey, you know what? We appreciate what you do. And that extended through my time there. We also, anytime someone performed really well or did something that was going above and beyond, we made sure we called that person out and gave them some type of award or recognition for what they did. And it seemed to me, and this was clearly an outsider's perspective when I took over, that just wasn't happening. I had employees tell me that wasn't happening, or wasn't happening with any regularity. So that was one of the big things that we initially used to get buy-in and to help change the culture, to make sure we were approachable.
And that's amazing, because that didn't cost you very much other than paper and a printer,
that's
right?
Exactly
basically,
right.
That's just amazing, and saying a few nice words. So you don't necessarily have to spend a lot of money to make employees happy. We're going to take another quick break. You're listening to Master Your Finances.
This is Master Your Finances with Kurt Baker, Certified Financial Planner Professional. Learn about tax efficiency, liability, owning, managing, and saving your money, and more from Kurt and his experienced panel of guests. Master Your Finances is underwritten in part by Certified Wealth Management and Investment and Rider University. Rider University offers flexible education for adult learners. For more information, it's rider.edu/nextstep.
Welcome back. You're listening to Master Your Finance. I'm here with Jeremy Deck, and we're talking about, right now we're at West Point.
Yep.
And really just be nice to your employees and recognize them and listen to them. I mean, it just sounds so simple and so basic, but you have to actually do it, right?
It's true.
And when you do these things, I think the rewards are significant that way. Any little bit of effort you have to put in. Hey, look, somebody does a good job. Just, hey, look, they just want to be. People want to be appreciated. Again, this is relationship. You talked about that earlier. Relationships are key. And recognizing people and letting them know that you appreciate what they're doing and what they've done. I know that just in general, the veterans, I know that this almost feels like automatic. You say thank you for your service and things like that. But if you really, really mean it, that actually means a lot to that person because they know what they went through and they know what they've dealt with. And I can see that on that. I mean, if you really mean it, you can see that like, wow, I'm really glad you recognize that. You understand what I've been through and what got me to the point that I'm at now. And employment is the same type of situation. People probably are working much harder than you think they are, doing things you're not seeing. And if you just recognize, hey, look, I noticed that you're doing a great job, and you give them a certificate and recognize them in front of their peers, then that's
huge.
Then other people are like, oh, that's really cool. So you did all this, and now what happened after that? So I'm assuming things changed a little bit.
Yeah, we started to turn the ship around to borrow a pretty famous leadership book. That's actually the title.
You can't go to the Merchant Marine, dude. All right,
yeah,
you got to stay on the Army side. You can't. That's not fair. You can't do that.
Well, I actually had a mentor actually use that book.
Okay.
Pretty regularly,
okay.
So shameless plug.
That's fine.
But yeah, so things started to turn around. We actually started, and one of the big takeaways I had from my pursuit of higher education was the ability to understand data, and data analytics was huge for me. And potentially, we essentially developed a marketing campaign. How do I get cadets and the student body to interact with us? And we use social media. Essentially social media engagement to drive some decision making, what we were putting on the menu, how often we were putting it on the menu, when we were taking it off the menu. To a degree, we even used data to understand what products we would add and take away from the catalog. So if we had a specific product, say eggs, that was not necessarily palatable or enjoyable, we actually took it off of the catalog and found a replacement.
Okay.
That the cadets themselves would actually do a tasting of, do some number crunching, or we would do some number crunching on the back end to figure out how the cadets rated it before we would add it as an option.
That's just amazing. I never would have thought that you would gone to that extent because, I mean, do you care? I mean, I don't know. I've been in the military, so like sometimes you feel like they don't care about like what you're eating or what you're doing. It's like, you get what you get. Enjoy.
Well, and one of the other,
but this is different. I'm just complimenting you. That's awesome.
I appreciate that. One of the other approaches we did too, from a data perspective, is we also got cadets involved.
Right.
So obviously, West Point was an institution of higher learning, in addition to being a leadership training school for the United States Army. We actually went out to, and one of their big claims to fame is engineering. Yep. And I actually went out to the engineering department and actually had classes do time motion studies of the way we process cadets through the serving area, how fast they got their food, what products they gravitate through, how to make the serving process as efficient as possible. And then one of the other things we did was we actually took a look at minimizing waste. So we would reach out to the student body and have them do case studies on our operation as a way to build involvement and awareness across the student body.
Yeah, because you may have just answered that question, but I've been thinking about this. Everything you're doing, it sounds like it's going to optimize for the cadets' experience. But how did it look as far as the balance sheet at the end of the day? So did you see any of how did your cost structure change? Did it change at all? Go up, down, same? What happened? Now, I know the cadets were I'm going to guess the cadets were happier with what was being delivered. What about the accountant in the back room looking at the books? What are they thinking?
Well, so it's funny. So the unique part about the academy is the way our operation was funded. So each cadet actually donates a and make sure I put it out there. West Point is not the typical university.
Right.
A cadet doesn't necessarily pay tuition in the same way a conventional college student would. But every cadet actually donates a portion of money back to us to prepare and procure their food. And one of the biggest things we did as the menu started to improve, we actually got added justification for improving and making changes to the products and getting more I say expensive products, but a wider range of products, a little bit higher quality. So when I got there, we had roughly $18 million a year to procure food for the cadets.
Right.
And when I left, we were at 24.
So
we could actually put together.
Just to make sure I'm clear. Now, the cadets, like, let's say, do I have like an allowance, food allowance, or is it just part of my compensation?
It is.
Do I get to decide how much? Because in our school, it was slightly different. I do remember that with doing ours was everything just paid for everything, and we didn't really have any say in it.
Pretty much how it works at West Point, also.
Oh, okay.
In a similar way.
Oh, okay, but I didn't like actually say, hey, I want to buy that, egg. Platter or whatever it is, right?
Correct.
How did you get to that? How did that number go up, like on the internal side?
It was justifying the expense through the accountants, as you called them. And it's a team of accountants.
I'm sure.
But it's essentially justifying to them and to the student body itself.
Okay.
So there was some buy-in from the student body also to improve the offering, offer more choice. And the justification to that was offering more products, offering food at times when a cadet couldn't make it to a specific meal to eat. We actually opened call it a to-go area where you could swing by and grab something on your way if you, for some reason, missed a meal. And that option was available in between breakfast and lunch, and then lunch and dinner.
And I do recall when my daughter was getting ready to go to school, it seemed like when you went to look at colleges, they always took you to their cafeteria, and they always wanted to show you what the food. I felt like it was almost like they wanted to show you more about the food than about the academics.
100%.
It felt like I go, because apparently we found out that is a big part of the decision-making process for many people. Like, how are my kids going to get fed, and are they going to be happy with whatever food system you have, right? So is this almost like part of the competitive part of like the academy? Because a lot of the people that go to the academy, obviously they're highly educated, and they can go pretty much any school they want. If they get into one of the academies, they pretty much can decide where they want to go to school for the most part. Is this one of these ways for they say, hey, look, come on in, man.
Yeah,
We'd like you to come here.
Yep. So there was a lot of opportunity in the summer for potential applicants to take a look at the academy and judge. And I don't have a real intimate knowledge of how they would recruit, but I do understand that there was a summer program where they would bring prospective applicants in.
Right.
I want to say it was called the Summer Leader Experience. I'm not sure if I'm getting that acronym right.
Okay,
but,
I got you.
It was essentially an opportunity to bring in prospective students to take a look at the academy, and we would essentially give them lunch every day they were there. It was a really awesome opportunity. In fact, I know some cadets that are some students that actually applied at some point over the last couple of years.
Okay. So now you're at the West Point. You turn around their whole eating experience, the cafeteria, the mess hall, whatever we want to call it here, whether we're civilian or military. So so now you've done that. So where did things head from there? I know you're,
so all good things must come to an end.
Right.
And going into 2019, I realized that I was in a very good place professionally.
Right.
I had joined the military for a specific reason, to go to college, to get those life experiences. And I started to realize that I wanted to have a second career after the military. So I started to entertain potentially retiring from the service and looking to civilian employment. And there was a lot of buildup to that. The military tries to arm you when you leave service with the skills necessary, with the knowledge to reach out to prospective employers, interview techniques, networking opportunities, resume writing. They put you through a set of courses that help prepare you for entering the workforce. And one of the biggest challenges I had leaving was understanding how what I did in the military transferred into the essentially corporate America. I knew I spent my first 12 years or so as a cook. I knew I was essentially a policy expert in terms of food service operations and multi-unit dining in the military. But getting me to understand that while I'm still wearing a suit and before I'd actually had this training, I wouldn't have known. It was just, you don't know what you don't know, and really trying to take what I was doing and quantify that for someone that has no idea of military jargon.
And I think that's a big thing. I think you're touching on it right now. Is I think one of the things that employers don't seem to understand is just how much training that military people have. And even though, maybe they learn how to, I don't know, maybe they drive a tank or something. I mean, like, I don't need anybody driving a tank in my office. I mean, I need somebody that knows how to like do Excel or something, right? So can you walk through like why military people tend to be very good material to train to do pretty much anything you can think of? And I think the corporate world, I think, is missing the boat on this. There's a lot of talent there that they don't seem to be tapping into that they should be.
Well, I would
speak
say
to that a little bit?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing that I noticed through interviews and networking opportunities I had was our veterans, frankly, ability to adapt. Mm-hmm. And that's pretty open-ended. What does it mean when you say adapt? Well, it's really trying to step back, take a look around and understanding the operation, understanding kind of like what I did when I got to West Point. It's really understanding the bits and pieces. And what I did at West Point, there was a lot of things I did at West Point. And one of the biggest opportunities I had in that assignment specific was understanding HR, understanding how the employee's benefits, what motivates them to do their job, understanding the disciplinary system within the military organization. And oh, by the way, I didn't mention that I was the only guy wearing an actual uniform at West Point in the food service operation.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that.
All of the food service employees at the cadet mess hall were civilians.
So civil servants, right?
Civil servants.
Yeah, I got you. Okay.
I had one military NCO that worked with me, but we had 80 civilian employees. Wow. And it's not like I can just go in and boss around civilian employees. No. And I think that's a common misconception in the military, that all you do is tell people what to do and they do it. Right. It's still a choice.
Right.
Obviously I have tools that maybe a civilian employer in corporate America doesn't have.
Right.
But at the same time, it's still a choice. If I tell somebody to do something, they have the option to say no.
Right.
And
absolutely.
And I have, other than the disciplinary action that can potentially follow, I have no other recourse than trying to figure out a way to motivate them, to get them to do what it is that needs to be done without having to go the disciplinary route. So that's a very last resort and an option you certainly don't want to go down unless you absolutely have no other choice.
Good point. We're going to take another quick break. You're listening to Master Your Finances.
This is Master Your Finances with Kurt Baker, Certified Financial Planner Professional. Learn about tax efficiency, liability, owning, managing, and saving your money, and more from Kurt and his experienced panel of guests. Master Your Finances is underwritten in part by Certified Wealth Management and Investment and Rider University. Rider University offers flexible education for adult learners. For more information, it's rider.edu/nextstep.
Welcome back. You're listening to Master Your Finances. I'm here with Jeremy Deck, and if you want good food, go to West Point, because Jeremy definitely set up a good system there. You're going to eat like a king or a queen, right? So thank you for that. And thanks for really helping the cadets out, because I know they definitely appreciate it. I remember when I was going to school, it's like, oh my gosh, thank goodness there's something good to eat. But all right, so to walk us through like what happened, now you give the prep thing, and I think this is really, really important, is that military people have a lot of skills and a lot of training that helps them learn almost anything. You said adaptability, which I think is really important. And I think, like most of us, I mean, when you come to get a job, how many people walk into that job having the skill set for that specific job? Everybody goes through some type of training. There's some type of period of training The question is really, are you going to learn what I want you to learn, or even the company? In fact, I know in different industries I've been in, it's like, I don't want to hire anybody in my industry because they're going to have bad habits coming in. I'd rather hire anybody who doesn't know anything about what I do, because when I hire them and I bring them and train them, they're going to listen to me and they're going to do it the way we do it, because we found that works best for us. Right. So in some ways, that's actually even another positive on top of it, because you're going to come in and listen. Okay, this is the way our company does it. So now you're going through all this process. So what happens now? You had some opportunities afterwards, right? Because you were doing a great job at West Point.
Yeah,
which we know.
Connected with, fast forward to summer of 2019, I actually met the president and CEO of Empire Blue Cross Blue Shield on a tour of West Point.
Relationships.
There you
that's
go. 100%. Yep. And I realized very quickly that I needed a mentor. And he served as that mentor for me. He had actually had some previous experience in the British military. In fact, if I remember correctly, he was a merchant marine too. I think I recall you saying,
it has to be awesome.
Yeah. Had a great experience with him serving as a mentor, and realized very quickly that the mentorship had potentially blossomed into something greater. Realized there was a potential job opportunity there. Right. And that's how I got into, in such a weird way, I went from food service to health insurance.
Right. Okay.
And I actually got into the health insurance industry leaving West Point. I knew I knew food service was going to be an option for me, but I had gotten to the end of my military career and I realized, you know something, I want to do something different. I had been to school, I had gotten my MBA, and I really wanted to figure out how to put my best foot forward in corporate America. And I figured what better place than New York City.
Yeah, that's definitely a lot of business going on there. And they love Excel in New York City. Let me tell you, they love spreadsheets, man.
Not just spreadsheets, but a whole bunch of other stuff too.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, so I actually started working in the health insurance industry space, and I felt like at the time I wanted to change health insurance. I wanted to make an impact.
Good for you, man. Let's do it.
I wanted to change health insurance. And I had an incredible experience. The team I worked with was absolutely out of this world. Really enjoyed being able to give back. And frankly, at the time, I was also giving back to a bunch of military opportunities and not-for-profits. And one of the biggest, we were talking about opportunities to help veterans early on. And I would say in fact, this is actually how I met my mentor at the time, was through a program on a not-for-profit called American Corporate Partners. They are a large national not-for-profit that actually pairs industry, corporate America mentors with separating service members and their spouses. It's an incredible program. If you want to volunteer as an individual, there's literally no commitment other than your time.
That's amazing.
No monetary commitment. All you have to do is reach out to someone at the company or the organization and fill out an intake, and they will pair you. They'll assign you with essentially a relationship manager who will take a look at your qualifications and figure out who aligns best. In fact, I'm now on my fourth. I like to give back. I'm actually now on my fourth mentorship arrangement. In fact, I'm connected with a site director for Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University down in Jacksonville area, North Carolina. Yeah. Okay. North Carolina, near Camp Lejeune. Okay. So in fact, she's a spouse of a Marine, a Marine Corps.
Okay, cool.
Or a Marine, I say Marine Corps. But, and this is my fourth mentorship arrangement. I've had 3 others. The arrangement lasts for a full year. And you essentially give up an hour of your time. They ask for an hour monthly.
Right.
And then you can do more if you like, and then continue the relationship beyond the year if you like. But the program itself really just is for 1 year.
And that's just amazing. Yeah. Well, I think it's amazing. One, again, you get back to relationships, which I think is cool. And I think another thing, and you can speak to this a little bit, but I mean, when you help others, you tend to learn a lot from their experiences, right? Yep. I mean, I think that's a key part of it too. It's a two-way street. I mean, you're obviously helping them with whatever transition they're going through, but I think you get a lot back from those people that you're helping as well. So it's really that's why I think as a country we tend to be very generous with helping others, because I think there's a whole other side of that sometimes people don't really pay attention to, but it's really there and it's awesome. So you're doing all that. Now I want you to talk a little bit more about now you're being mentored, right?
Yep.
You're mentoring other people. So tell me like where you went from there.
Well, so I had actually gotten progressed through the company. In I think November of 2021, I actually became an account manager with the company. I had actually worked with current clients as a way to work through issues with their health insurance coverage. And this is all employer-based health insurance programs. And I very quickly started to realize and understand that I wanted to do, I guess, I say something different. I wanted to be more consultative. I wanted to work directly with employers, essentially, to find ways to improve their benefits offering. So I told you when I was at West Point, I had done a lot of HR work. When you have that many employees, 90% of my time at West Point was with employees working on HR-related issues. And I felt what better fit than an HR and benefits company. So in November of last year, in fact, at this point, almost 4 months ago, I made the decision to move to USI Insurance Services, which is essentially a large HR and benefits brokerage. We compete with some of the biggest names in the industry.
Right, because that kind of fits right in with your experience, right? Which is interesting, right? So who would have thought like a warrant officer from the military would be now handling HR benefits, because you have all that experience from all those people that you were dealing with throughout that time frame. Right? So you do have a lot of like relatable experience, which is awesome. So what's headed forward for you now at this point? You're getting ramped up in this whole thing, right? So this has got to be an interesting career change for you again.
It is, one of the big things that I take away from my new employer is our unique approach to servicing clients.
Okay.
And one of the most unique features of the company I work for now is data. Going back to and revisiting some of our previous parts of the conversation is USI utilizes data in a very unique way relative to the rest of the industry. And I'll use one example. We actually have a benchmarking survey that we allow employers to take part in. And really it allows those employers to measure the effectiveness of their benefits across competitors nationally. So we actually, a company inputs their contribution percentages, their individual benefits into our system, and then we actually look across the entire, essentially our entire book of business, and understand based on industry, geographic location, and employer size, and really find the best fit that companies like you are doing. And we essentially benchmark each one of those companies against the greater pool within an industry.
So that would probably make your the capital you're rolling out as far as the benefits goes more efficient.
Correct.
Because now you're spending 100%. more on the areas that are actually something the employees want, and less on the areas that maybe they're not paying as much of attention to it.
100%.
So are they seeing any like trends out there now with like how what employees are kind of looking for that maybe an employer hadn't really thought about as much? It's maybe coming to the forefront a little bit now.
Yeah. So one of the big drivers right now is wellness. And pharmacy benefits are huge. In fact, most large companies spend upwards of 30% just on their pharmacy benefit alone. And there's a lot of opportunity for savings, especially the bigger the company, the more you can save. In fact, I know of a couple of companies locally that spend $2 million or more just in pharmacy benefits for their employees, which is huge.
Yeah, that is huge.
It's a big number.
Absolutely.
But that's incredibly important, and benefits are extremely unique because it's not, for a lot of people, there's a certain level of passion for what you do for the company. But on the flip side of that, you don't necessarily, as long as your benefits are working, you don't necessarily completely think about them. As long as I'm not paying too much for my benefits, it's not something I'm thinking about. What becomes a friction point for a lot of employees is when I'm getting to a point where I'm spending $7,000, $8,000, $9,000, $10,000 a year just to make sure I can go to the doctor.
Right.
And that's finding ways as an employer to offset those costs or minimize those costs to your employees is an incredibly powerful recruiting tool, and a retention tool for that matter. Because let's face it, a lot of employers are fighting for talent right now. And one of the biggest ways to help attract talent is through benefits. And one of the big, I guess, call it resources that's out there is fertility benefits. I actually worked a good portion of time in New York and worked for a New York-based insurance provider, and fertility benefits were huge. Not just for heterosexual spouses, but same-sex spouses. Right. That's a huge benefit. And in fact, not only as a way to grow a family, but also for actual fertility-related treatments. And that's, for a long time, those were optional procedures that weren't covered, and the expense on the employee was huge. In some cases, $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 just to start a family, and that's not something that it's easy to put a price on.
Well, that's amazing, Jeremy. We're running out of time. Any final thoughts before we head out for today? You just did a great job.
No, I appreciate the time, and one of the things that I hope showed through in our conversation was my passion for people. And that's one of the things that I wanted to leave with is just, I throughout my career and now in the civilian world, it's all about helping people.
Absolutely.
And that's what I want to do.
Well, you're doing a great job of it, Jeremy. Keep it up with the great work. You're listening to Master Your Finances. Have a wonderful day.
That was this week's episode of Master Your Finances with Kurt Baker, Certified Financial Planner Professional. Tune in every Sunday at 9 a.m. to expand your knowledge in building and managing your wealth. Missed an episode? No worries. You can subscribe to a free weekly episode of Master Your Finances to listen to on your favorite podcasting platform. Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, whatever. Master Your Finances is underwritten in part by Certified Wealth Management and Investment and Rider University. Rider offers continuing studies programs for adults who need flexibility. Want to add new skills to your resume? Take a continuing studies course at Rider University.